Well, this is the presentation for the 31st Sunday of Ordinary Time in Year C, and the children's liturgy focuses on the Gospel reading, which is Jesus raises the widow's son at Nain. This year, in 2025, which will not be the case next year, it falls on November the 2nd, which happens to be the Feast of All Souls, or the celebration of All Souls. The doctrine point is as follows for the catechist. The miracles of raising people from the dead demonstrated Jesus' power over life itself. The raising of the son of the widow of Nain is an account of a miracle by Jesus recorded in the Gospel of Luke chapter 7. Jesus arrived at the village of Nain during the burial ceremony of the son of a widow and raised this young man from the dead. So you can make quite a scene there using the gospel characters, including one of the women who can represent the widow. Here she is. Somebody who's representing the young man. There he is. And Jesus, taken from the gospel characters, because he's preaching Jesus or speaking Jesus, not Jesus of the Last Supper or the resurrection. Several characters could be added to this if you want. So, for example, a few of the apostles could be included as well. And then some kind of a wooden board. Here it is just the actual tabletop of the Last Supper is working for a kind of a bier that the people would be carrying the young man on. And some kind of white cloth. You can take one from the Cenacle kit, the tabletop cover, or just use a tissue as I have done here, because it lets you wrap a white kind of shroud around that young person. Then you need a backdrop scene. This one is a street scene, could be on the outskirts of the town, and the magnetic maps, which will point out certain places that are named in the presentation. So that's here waiting. And this is how the presentation goes. In the previous chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, it tells us that great numbers of people were following Jesus. And they were from all over Israel. They were from Judea, from Jerusalem, from Tyre and Sidon, and all the other places in between, probably. So, he'll give you an idea of just how many places they were coming from. They were coming from this is Tyre and Sidon, all up north. Probably coming from Galilee as well. Nain is actually here, just in Samaria. And then Samaria, and then also Judea, the whole region of Judea, including Jerusalem itself. So they had really traveled long distances to spend time with Jesus. They came to hear his message and to be healed of their diseases. The Gospel of today accounts of an amazing miracle. It took place at the gates of a village called Nain. These are some words and phrases that you would need to understand when you're listening. A bier. This is a board, a kind of a board on which a person who has died is placed to be taken to the burial place. Just got a little board there to represent that. Then the word compassion means to feel deeply for another person's suffering and sorrow. And this interesting phrase, fear seized all of them. Now, when you hear that in the context, in this particular setting, the word fear indicates a kind of sense of breathlessness or wonder and awe and amazement. That's what that word fear means in this context, that seeing the power of Jesus, they were filled with awe and wonder. It's expressed with the word fear in this case. So let's light our candle as we're listening to the Gospel. Jesus went to to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went with him. As he approached the gate of the town, a man who had died was being carried out. This is his mother. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow, and with her was a large crowd from the town. When Jesus saw her, he had compassion for her and said, "Do not weep." Then he came forward and he touched the bier. And the bearers stood still. He said, "Young man, I tell you, rise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak. Fear seized all of them. They glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen among us. God has looked favorably on his people." The word about him spread throughout Judea and all the surrounding country. I wonder why Jesus felt such deep compassion for the widow's suffering. I wonder why the widow's suffering would be very specially great. What about her circumstances would make this particularly difficult for her? And what this event tells us about the way Jesus considers our suffering when we suffer. So there are the pondering questions. I would just add that you could add a lot more figures in here. I've kept it fairly simple this time, not to clutter the small area I have for the filming, but you would add some apostles with Jesus quite possibly, and other figures from the characters of the gospel kit. Pondering again can happen through, if there is time, using the actual diorama to reenact the scene, drawing the scene, mindful colouring in, composing a personal prayer. And often that's a good option, to compose a personal prayer, considering the last I wonder point that was raised there. I wonder what this event tells us about the way Jesus considers our own suffering. They could respond perhaps with a prayer.